May 2025. For the first time in history, the United States officially labeled a Mexican cartel as terrorists. Not drug dealers, not criminals, terrorists. But here's what the media isn't telling you. This wasn't just some political move. This was revenge. Because when cartels killed over 100,000 Americans with fentanyl, they made one fatal mistake. They messed with the wrong country. In the next minutes, I'll show you 5 times cartels thought they were untouchable until they discovered that some enemies don't just fight back, they completely destroy you. And what happened to the Sinaloa cartel in 2025? That's just the beginning. Story 1. The Sinaloa Cartel versus the United States, 2025. Let's start with the most recent case that's still making headlines. July 25, 2024. Ismael El Mayo Zambada, the 76-year-old co-founder of the Sinaloa Cartel, steps off a private plane in El Paso, Texas. But this wasn't a vacation. This was a trap. For over 50 years, El Mayo had been untouchable. He'd never spent a single day in prison. He controlled billions in drug money and had an army of killers at his command. But the U.S. government had been playing the long game. The trap was set by Joaquin Guzman Lopez, El Chapo's own son. He lured El Mayo onto that plane, promising a meeting about airstrip deals. Instead, he delivered him straight to American authorities. But here's where it gets interesting. The U.S. wasn't satisfied with just arresting him. In May 2025, they did something unprecedented. They charged Sinaloa cartel leaders with narco-terrorism. This wasn't just about drugs anymore. The Department of Justice declared that killing Americans with fentanyl was an act of terrorism. And terrorists, they get life sentences. No parole, no deals. The numbers tell the story. In just the first half of 2025, the DEA seized 44 million fentanyl pills and 4,500 pounds of fentanyl powder. That's enough to kill every person in America twice. But the U.S. didn't stop there. They went after the money. Treasury sanctions froze millions in cartel assets. They targeted everyone. The money launderers, the corrupt officials, even the businesses that helped them. By August 2025, 26 cartel fugitives were in U.S. custody. The message was clear. You can run, but you can't hide from the full power of the American government. The Sinaloa cartel thought they were fighting drug agents. They were actually fighting the entire United States. And when you're labeled a terrorist organization, the gloves come off. Story 2. The Gulf Cartel versus American tourists, 2023. March 3, 2023, 4 Americans crossed the border into Matamoros, Mexico for a simple medical procedure. What happened next would trigger an international incident. Latavia Washington McGee, Eric Williams, Shaheed Woodard, and Zindel Brown were driving through the city when Gulf Cartel gunmen opened fire. In broad daylight, they dragged the Americans from their shot-up vehicle. The cartel members were high, paranoid, and trigger-happy. They thought the Americans were rival cartel spies. 2 of the friends, Woodard and Brown, were executed immediately. McGee and Williams were taken to multiple locations, tortured, and held for days. Williams was shot in both legs and forced to endure surgery without anesthesia. They were guarded by men in red devil masks who threatened them with death. But the Gulf Cartel made a critical error. They kidnapped American citizens. And when you mess with Americans on foreign soil, you get the full attention of the U.S. government. Within hours, the State Department was on the phone with Mexican officials. The pressure was immediate and intense. Find them or face consequences. Here's where it gets interesting. The Gulf Cartel did something almost unprecedented. They issued a public apology. They admitted the kidnapping was a mistake and handed over 5 of their own members to authorities. Think about that. A cartel that terrorizes Mexico was so scared of American retaliation that they threw their own people under the bus and begged for forgiveness. The survivors were returned under heavy military escort, but the damage was done. The Gulf Cartel had learned what happens when you mess with American citizens. You face the wrath of the most powerful military in the world. The cartel thought they were dealing with random tourists. They were actually declaring war on America. Story 3. The Knights Templar versus the Mexican people, 2013 to 2014. 2013. The Knights Templar cartel controlled Michoacan like medieval lords. They taxed everything, lime harvests, businesses, even funerals. But they made one fatal mistake. They pushed the people too far. Dr. Jose Manuel Mireles wasn't a soldier. He was a country doctor who treated farmers and their families. But when the cartel started kidnapping his patients and bleeding his community dry, something inside him snapped. February 24th, 2013. Dr. Mireles stood in the town square of Tepalcatepec and made an announcement that would change everything. If the government won't protect us, we'll protect ourselves. What started as a few angry farmers quickly became an army. Teachers, shopkeepers, lime pickers, ordinary people grabbed whatever weapons they could find and joined the autodefensas, the self-defense groups. The Knights Templar laughed at first. What could a bunch of farmers do against professional killers? They found out quickly. Town after town fell to the autodefensas. Cartel safe houses were burned. Drug labs were destroyed. Dr. Mireles became the face of the movement. This tall, mustached man in a cowboy hat went on national television with a simple message. Stand up and fight. The government won't save you, but you can save yourselves. The movement spread like wildfire. Across Michoacan, communities rose up. They had AK-47s, hunting rifles, and even weapons stolen from the cartels themselves. For the first time, it wasn't the cartel hunting civilians, it was civilians hunting the cartel. The Knights Templar, once untouchable, found themselves on the run. Their leader, Servando La Tuta Gomez, went from controlling an entire state to hiding in safe houses, constantly moving to avoid capture. The Mexican government, embarrassed by citizens doing their job, finally intervened. They arrested Dr. Mireles and tried to disband the autodefensas, but the damage was done. February 27, 2015. La Tuta was finally captured by federal police. The Knights Templar cartel was finished, destroyed not by the government, but by the people they terrorized. The cartel thought they were fighting helpless farmers. They were actually fighting the entire population of Michoacan. Story 4. Los Zetas versus Don Alejo Garza Tamés, 2010. November 13, 2010. Los Zetas, Mexico's most feared cartel, made what they thought was a routine visit to a 77-year-old rancher. They wanted his land. What they got was a war. Don Alejo Garza Tamés wasn't just any rancher. Born in 1933, he'd spent his life building his 2,000-hectare ranch in Tamaulipas. This was his life's work, his legacy, and he wasn't about to hand it over to criminals. The Zetas rolled up in their convoy, heavily armed and confident. Their message was simple: leave in 24 hours or die. Most people would have packed their bags and run. Don Alejo had a different response. I'll be waiting for you. What happened next was like something out of an action movie. Don Alejo sent his workers home to keep them safe, then spent the night turning his ranch into a fortress. He had hunting rifles legally acquired over the years, and he knew how to use them. He positioned weapons at every window, every door. This 77-year-old man was preparing to take on an entire cartel by himself. November 14th, 4 a.m. The Zetas' convoy returned, expecting to find an empty house. Instead, they found hell. The first shots came from the house. The cartel members, caught completely off guard, scrambled for cover. They thought they'd walked into an ambush, multiple shooters, coordinated fire. They had no idea it was just one old man running from window to window. Desperate, the Zetas threw grenades at the house. The shooting continued. More of their men fell. As dawn broke and the sound of gunfire echoed across the countryside, they knew the authorities would come. The cartel retreated, leaving 6 of their own behind. 6 professional killers, taken down by a 77-year-old rancher defending his home. When the Mexican Marines arrived, they found over 1,000 shell casings scattered across the property. 4 dead cartel members outside, 2 more barely alive inside. And in the house, Don Alejo, still holding his rifle. Don Alejo became a folk hero overnight. Songs were written about him, murals painted in his honor. He proved that sometimes, one man with courage and a rifle can make even the most feared cartel think twice. Los Zetas thought they were intimidating a helpless old man. They were actually challenging a warrior who would rather die fighting than live in fear. Story 5. The Guadalajara Cartel versus the DEA, 1985. February 7, 1985. The Guadalajara Cartel made the biggest mistake in cartel history. They kidnapped and murdered a DEA agent. What followed was the complete destruction of Mexico's most powerful criminal organization. Enrique "Kiki" Camarena was a DEA agent who'd spent years infiltrating the Guadalajara cartel. His work had led to the destruction of Rancho Bufalo, a $2.5 billion marijuana plantation. The cartel wanted revenge. That afternoon, as Kiki left the U.S. consulate in Guadalajara to meet his wife for lunch, cartel gunmen grabbed him in broad daylight. They thought killing a DEA agent would send a message. It did, just not the one they expected. For 30 hours, they tortured Kiki at a safe house. They broke his ribs, his jaw, his skull. They electrocuted him and injected him with amphetamines to keep him conscious. When he finally died, they wrapped his body in plastic and buried him. The cartel leaders celebrated, but they had no idea what was coming. President Ronald Reagan was furious. He shut down the entire U.S.-Mexico border, crippling Mexico's economy. The message was clear: find Kiki's killers or pay the price. The DEA launched Operation Leyenda, the largest drug and homicide manhunt in agency history. This wasn't just about justice. This was about revenge. One by one, the cartel leaders fell. Rafael Caro Quintero was captured in Costa Rica. Ernesto Fonseca was arrested by the Mexican army. Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, the cartel's mastermind, evaded capture for 4 years before the DEA finally got him. All 3 founders received 40-year sentences, but the real punishment was watching their empire crumble. The Guadalajara Cartel, once Mexico's most powerful criminal organization, was completely destroyed. The cartel splintered into smaller factions, including what would become the Sinaloa Cartel, but none would ever again reach the power of the original Guadalajara Cartel. The cartel thought they could kill an American agent and walk away. They learned that when you kill a DEA agent, you don't just face the agency, you face the full power of the United States government. So there you have it. 5 times cartels thought they were untouchable until they messed with the wrong people. Notice the pattern? Every time a cartel gets too confident, too brutal, too public, they create enemies more powerful than themselves. The Sinaloa Cartel thought they could poison America with fentanyl. Now they're labeled terrorists. The Gulf Cartel thought they could kidnap Americans. They ended up apologizing and sacrificing their own men. And this is just the beginning. With cartels now officially designated as terrorist organizations, the rules have completely changed. We're not talking about drug busts anymore. We're talking about military operations, drone strikes, and the full power of the American war machine. If you want to stay updated on how this cartel war unfolds, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because trust me, this story is far from over. The US government has declared war on the cartels, and when America goes to war, they don't lose. We're about to see the most powerful military in the world turn its attention to these criminal organizations, and it's going to be unlike anything we've ever witnessed. Drop a comment below. Which story shocked you the most? The 77-year-old rancher taking on Los Zetas, the farmers who destroyed the Knights Templar, or the fact that cartels are now officially terrorists? Remember, when cartels mess with the wrong people, they don't just lose battles, they lose everything. And in 2025, they've messed with the biggest, most powerful enemy they could possibly choose. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. A private jet lands at a Texas airfield. Within minutes, the most wanted man in Mexico is in handcuffs. But this isn't just any arrest. This is Ismael El Mayo Zambada, the ghost who ran the Sinaloa cartel for over 50 years without ever spending a single day in prison. But here's what the media won't tell you. This wasn't just a lucky break. This was the culmination of a secret military operation that's been hunting cartel bosses for decades. And what happened next will shock you. Because in the last 18 months, US Marines have systematically dismantled Mexico's most powerful criminal organizations. And today, I'm going to show you exactly how they did it. Section 1. The Ghost Who Ruled Mexico. To understand why El Mayo's arrest is so significant, you need to understand who this man really was. While El Chapo grabbed headlines, El Mayo was the real power behind the throne. Born in 1948 in rural Sinaloa, Ismael Zambada Garcia didn't start as a criminal mastermind. He began as a small-time farmer, but by the 1970s, he discovered something more profitable than corn: cocaine. What made El Mayo different wasn't his brutality, it was his intelligence. While other cartel bosses waged wars and made enemies, El Mayo built relationships. He corrupted officials, not through fear, but through friendship and money. For 5 decades, this man moved billions of dollars in drugs into the United States: cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and most recently, fentanyl, the drug that's killing 70,000 Americans every year. But El Mayo was untouchable. He never used cell phones, never stayed in the same place twice, never trusted anyone completely. The DEA had a $15 million bounty on his head, and he just vanished into the mountains of Sinaloa like smoke. Until July 25th, 2024, when everything changed. Section 2. The Trap That Took Down a Ghost. The arrest happened so quietly that even El Mayo didn't see it coming. According to sources, he believed he was flying to inspect clandestine airfields in northern Mexico. Instead, the plane crossed into US airspace and landed in El Paso. But here's where the story gets interesting and where the official narrative starts to fall apart. The government claims this was a law enforcement operation, but multiple sources suggest something much bigger was happening behind the scenes. Because El Mayo wasn't just arrested, he was betrayed. And that betrayal was orchestrated by people who've been hunting him for years. The man who delivered El Mayo was Joaquin Guzman Lopez, El Chapo's son. But why would the son of El Chapo betray his father's closest ally? The answer lies in a secret deal that's been years in the making. US intelligence agencies had been working on Guzman Lopez for months, offering him something no amount of money could buy: freedom for his family and protection from rival cartels. But this wasn't just about flipping one cartel member. This was part of a larger strategy that's been dismantling Mexican cartels piece by piece. Section 3. The Marine Strategy That Changed Everything. What most people don't realize is that the US military has been quietly revolutionizing how America fights the drug war. And it all started with a single principle: treat cartels like terrorist organizations, not criminal gangs. This shift began after the murder of DEA agent PEAKY Camarena in 1985, but it accelerated dramatically in the 2020s when cartels started using military-grade weapons and tactics against Mexican and US forces. The Marines developed a three-pronged strategy. First, intelligence fusion. Instead of relying on traditional law enforcement methods, they created joint intelligence centers that combined CIA, NSA, DEA, and military intelligence. Second, precision targeting. Using the same techniques developed in Iraq and Afghanistan, they began tracking cartel leaders like high-value terrorist targets. Third, psychological operations. They realized that cartels depend on their reputation for invincibility, so they began systematically destroying that reputation. And it's working. In the last 18 months alone, this strategy has led to the capture or killing of over 50 high-ranking cartel leaders. Section 4. The Domino Effect. El Mayo's arrest wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a systematic campaign that's been toppling cartel leaders like dominoes. January 2023. Ovidio Guzman Lopez, El Chapo's son, captured in a military operation that looked like a war zone. March 2023. Colombian crime boss Ruben Dario Vargas, captured thanks to intelligence from a widow seeking revenge. August 2024. The DEA's largest single operation against the Sinaloa cartel results in 617 arrests in 1 week. But here's what makes this different from previous drug war efforts. The Marines aren't just arresting foot soldiers. They're systematically targeting the financial networks, the corruption systems, and the psychological foundations that keep these organizations running. Take the case of El Marino Loco, the rogue Marine who humiliated cartel bosses by forcing them to wear women's lingerie and filming their arrests. This wasn't just about justice. It was about destroying the mystique that makes young men want to join cartels. When your heroes are shown crying in pink bras on social media, the glamour disappears pretty quickly. Section 5. The Technology Revolution. But the real game changer has been technology. The same systems used to hunt ISIS leaders in Syria are now being used to track cartel bosses in Mexico. A MOS, Air and Marine Operations Surveillance System. This radar network can track any aircraft or vessel moving through cartel territory. Signals intelligence. Every phone call, every text message, every encrypted communication is being monitored and analyzed by AI systems. Drone surveillance. Reaper drones circle cartel strongholds 24/7, feeding real-time intelligence to command centers. The result? Cartel leaders can no longer hide. Every movement is tracked, every communication is intercepted, every safe house is compromised. This is why El Mayo's arrest was so significant. For 50 years, he stayed invisible by avoiding technology. But in 2024, there's no such thing as invisible anymore. Section 6. The Human Cost and Moral Complexity. But this story isn't just about military tactics and technology. It's about the human cost of the drug war on both sides of the border. In Mexico, over 300,000 people have died in cartel-related violence since 2006. Entire towns have been abandoned. Children grow up knowing more about AK-47s than textbooks. In the United States, fentanyl has become the leading cause of death for Americans under 50. That's more than car accidents, more than suicide, more than COVID-19. The mothers who've lost children to cartel violence like Miriam Rodriguez, who hunted down her daughter's killers one by one before being murdered herself. They represent the real cost of this war. But there's also a moral complexity here that's uncomfortable to discuss. When U.S. Marines help capture cartel leaders, are they bringing justice? Or are they just creating power vacuums that lead to more violence? The truth is, every cartel leader captured creates an opportunity for rivals to fight for territory. El Mayo's arrest has already triggered violence in Sinaloa as different factions battle for control. Section 7. What happens next? As I'm recording this, El Mayo is sitting in a U.S. federal prison, facing charges that could put him away for life. At 76 years old, he'll likely die in prison. But his arrest raises bigger questions about the future of the drug war. Question 1. Will this strategy actually work? The evidence is mixed. While high-profile arrests make headlines, drug flow into the U.S. hasn't significantly decreased. New leaders emerge, new routes open, new drugs appear. Question 2. What about Mexican sovereignty? Many Mexicans see U.S. military involvement as a violation of their sovereignty. President López Obrador has repeatedly criticized U.S. operations on Mexican soil. Question 3. Are we creating more problems than we're solving? Every cartel leader removed creates instability. The question is whether that short-term chaos leads to long-term peace or just more sophisticated criminal organizations. Section 8. The bigger picture. Here's what most people don't understand. The drug trade isn't just a Mexican problem or even a North American problem. It's a global industry worth over $400 billion annually. Cartels have evolved from local criminal gangs into multinational corporations. They have supply chains in Asia, distribution networks in Europe, and money laundering operations in dozens of countries. The Sinaloa cartel alone operates in over 50 countries. They have accountants, lawyers, logistics experts, and IT departments. They're not just criminals, they're businessmen who happen to sell illegal products. This is why traditional law enforcement approaches haven't worked. You can't arrest your way out of a problem this big and this sophisticated. The Marine strategy recognizes this reality. Instead of just arresting dealers, they're targeting the entire ecosystem. The corruption, the money laundering, the psychological appeal, the technological infrastructure. No, I didn't finish. I got cut off. Let me complete the script for you. Section 9. The future of the drug war. So, where does this all lead? Based on current trends and emerging technologies, here's what the drug war might look like in the next decade. Artificial intelligence will predict cartel movements before they happen. Machine learning algorithms are already analyzing patterns in communication, financial transactions, and movement data to predict where violence will occur. Blockchain technology will make money laundering nearly impossible. Every financial transaction will be traceable, making it harder for cartels to move their profits. Autonomous drone swarms will patrol borders 24/7. No human pilot needed. AI will identify and track suspicious activity automatically. Biometric identification will make fake identities obsolete. Facial recognition, DNA analysis, and behavioral pattern recognition will make it impossible for cartel leaders to hide their identities. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Technology alone won't solve this problem. The arrest of El Mayo Zambada marks the end of an era. The last of the old-school cartel bosses who built their empires in the shadows is now behind bars. But his capture also raises the most important question of all. What kind of drug war do we want to fight? Do we want a war fought with Marines and drones and surveillance systems? Or do we want to address the root causes: poverty, corruption, and demand? The mothers who lost their children to cartel violence, they didn't want revenge. They wanted justice. They wanted a world where their children could grow up safe. The Marines who risked their lives hunting cartel bosses, they're not doing it for glory. They're doing it because someone has to stand between evil and innocent people. And the families destroyed by fentanyl in American communities, they don't care about politics or sovereignty. They just want the killing to stop. El Mayo's arrest won't end the drug war, but it proves that even the most untouchable criminals can be touched. Even the most invisible ghosts can be found. Even the most powerful empires can fall. The question is, what comes next? If this story shocked you, wait until you see what I've uncovered about the secret operations targeting the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. The footage I obtained will blow your mind. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell because this rabbit hole goes deeper than you can imagine. The war isn't over, it's just getting started. August 2025. Over 600 cartel members arrested in a single week. The sons of El Chapo behind bars. The Sinaloa cartel's empire crumbling. But here's what the media isn't telling you. This wasn't just another drug bust. This was the final blow in a 20-year war that started when these cartels made one fatal mistake. They underestimated the full power of the world's most dangerous governments. These are 5 times cartels messed with the wrong government and paid the ultimate price. Number 5. The Sinaloa Cartel versus the United States, 2024 to 2025. Let me paint you a picture of what happened in August 2025. Picture this. Coordinated raids across multiple states, helicopters circling, SWAT teams breaking down doors. In just 7 days, over 600 people connected to the Sinaloa cartel were arrested. The seizure numbers are staggering. 480 kilograms of fentanyl powder, over 700,000 counterfeit pills, 2,200 kilograms of methamphetamine, 7,400 kilograms of cocaine, 420 firearms, and nearly $13 million in cash. But this story really begins with a family dynasty. When Joaquin El Chapo Guzman was sentenced to life in prison in 2019, his sons, Ovidio, Joaquin, Ivan, and Jesus Alfredo, took control of what's known as Los Chapitos faction. Here's where they made their fatal mistake. While their father focused on cocaine and heroin, the sons went all in on fentanyl. They flooded American streets with a drug so deadly that it's now killing over 70,000 Americans every year. The US government had enough. This wasn't just about drugs anymore. This was about national security. When you're killing more Americans than car accidents, you've crossed a line that no government can ignore. The dominoes started falling fast. First, Ovidio Guzman Lopez was arrested and extradited. He pleaded guilty to federal drug charges. Then, Joaquin Guzman Lopez was captured and is awaiting trial in the United States. The remaining brothers, Ivan and Jesus Alfredo, are now fugitives with $10 million bounties on their heads. But here's the kicker. Their arrests triggered violent internal warfare within the cartel itself. When you remove the leadership of a billion-dollar criminal empire, chaos follows. Rival factions are now fighting for control, and the Mexican government is caught in the crossfire. The US didn't stop at arrests. They imposed crushing economic sanctions, freezing assets, and cutting off financial networks that took decades to build. The message was clear. Mess with American lives on this scale, and we'll dismantle your entire organization, piece by piece. Number 4. Los Zetas versus the Mexican military, 2010 to 2015. Now let's talk about a cartel that thought they were untouchable because they were made up of former military elite. Los Zetas started as deserters from Mexico's special forces, highly trained, heavily armed, and absolutely ruthless. By 2010, they controlled vast territories across Mexico and had expanded into Central America. They weren't just trafficking drugs, they were running kidnapping rings, human trafficking operations, and extortion rackets. But then they went too far. The San Fernando massacres of 2010 and 2011 shocked even a country used to cartel violence. In the first massacre, 72 migrants seeking a better life were brutally murdered. In the second, 193 people were killed and buried in mass graves. This wasn't just crime anymore. This was terrorism on Mexican soil. President Felipe Calderón declared all-out war, deploying 50,000 troops across the country. The Mexican military launched Operation Northeast, specifically targeting Los Zetas' leadership. They used intelligence from the DEA, satellite surveillance, and coordinated strikes that the cartel had never faced before. The breakthrough came in 2013 with the capture of Miguel Trevino Morales, known as Z40, one of the most feared cartel leaders in Mexican history. This wasn't a shootout or a chase. Mexican Marines surrounded his convoy on a dirt road and took him alive. But the government wasn't done. They systematically dismantled the entire command structure. Omar Trevino Morales, Z42, was arrested in 2015. Dozens of lieutenants followed. The result? Los Zetas went from controlling a third of Mexico to being a fragmented shadow of their former selves. The Mexican military proved that no matter how well-trained or well-armed a criminal organization is, they can't match the full resources of a determined government. Number 3. The Gulf Cartel versus the DEA 1985 to 1989. February 7, 1985. DEA agent Enrique "PEAKY" Camarena stepped out of the U.S. consulate in Guadalajara, Mexico, looking forward to lunch with his wife. He never made it home. 4 to 5 cars filled with armed men were waiting. They kidnapped him in broad daylight and took him to a house where over 50 people, politicians, government officials, and narcos, were celebrating his capture. For 2 days, Camarena was mercilessly tortured. They brought in a doctor to keep him conscious during the ordeal. When he finally died, they wrapped his body in plastic and buried him in a nearby park. The cartel leaders thought they'd sent a message. Instead, they'd just declared war on the United States government. President Ronald Reagan's response was swift and devastating. Reagan completely shut down the U.S.-Mexico border. Every crossing, every checkpoint, every port of entry closed. Mexico's economy, which depended heavily on trade with the U.S., began hemorrhaging money by the hour. The message to the Mexican government was clear: find Camarena's killers or watch your economy collapse. The pressure was so intense that Mexico had no choice but to cooperate fully with the largest DEA manhunt in history. Operation Leyenda, Legend, was launched. Special Agent Hector Bareles led a team that would eventually span multiple countries and involve hundreds of agents. One by one, they fell. Rafael Caro Quintero was arrested in Costa Rica. Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo was captured by the Mexican army. Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, the godfather of Mexican drug trafficking, was finally arrested and sentenced to 40 years in prison. The Guadalajara cartel, once the most powerful criminal organization in Mexico, was completely destroyed. The message resonated throughout the criminal underworld. Kill a federal agent, and the full weight of the U.S. government will hunt you to the ends of the earth. Number 2. MS-13 versus El Salvador, 2022 to present. March 2022. El Salvador was a war zone. MS-13, one of the world's most brutal gangs, had turned the small Central American nation into their personal kingdom of terror. In just 3 days, 87 people were brutally murdered. Fruit sellers, surf instructors, cobblers, innocent people targeted simply because MS-13 wanted to send a message to the government. But they picked the wrong president to mess with. Nayib Bukele declared a state of emergency and launched the most aggressive anti-gang campaign in modern history. The numbers are staggering. In less than 18 months, over 70,000 suspected gang members were arrested. That's roughly 1% of El Salvador's entire population behind bars. Bukele didn't just arrest them. He built a brand new supermax prison called the Terrorism Confinement Center. This isn't your typical jail. It's designed to break the spirit of gang members. Hundreds of bare-chested prisoners are packed together in rows, wearing only underwear. No visitors, no phone calls, no sunlight. The message is clear. Join a gang, and this is your future. The results speak for themselves. El Salvador went from having one of the world's highest murder rates to one of the lowest in the Western Hemisphere. Homicides dropped by over 95%. Critics call it authoritarian. Human rights groups condemn the mass arrests. But here's what they're not telling you. Bukele has over 90% approval rating from his own people. For the first time in decades, families can walk the streets without fear. Children can play outside. Businesses can operate without paying extortion. MS-13's entire leadership structure in El Salvador has been decimated. The gang that once controlled entire neighborhoods now operates from prison cells, if at all. The lesson: when a government decides that enough is enough and commits fully to destroying a criminal organization, even the most brutal gangs can be crushed. Number 1. The Sicilian Mafia versus Mussolini's Italy, 1924 to 1929. Sicily was a lawless island where the Mafia ruled with absolute power. Feudal landlords, corrupt officials, and criminal families had turned this beautiful Mediterranean paradise into their personal kingdom. When Benito Mussolini visited Sicily, he expected the red carpet treatment. Instead, he got the ultimate insult from Don Francesco Cuccia, a prominent Mafia boss and mayor. Cuccia told Mussolini he didn't need all those police and soldiers because he was under his protection. Then, when Mussolini appeared on the balcony expecting thunderous applause, Cuccia had deliberately assembled only village idiots, beggars, and homeless people to greet him. The humiliation was complete. Mussolini, a man who demanded absolute respect and control, had been publicly embarrassed by a criminal. This was a mistake that would cost the Mafia everything. In 1925, Mussolini appointed Cesare Mori, a veteran lawman with years of experience fighting organized crime, to completely destroy the Sicilian Mafia. Mori's campaign was ruthless and systematic. He surrounded entire towns with armored cars, cut telephone lines, and conducted house-to-house searches. This wasn't policing. This was warfare. In the hilltop town of Gangi, Mori's forces laid siege like it was a medieval castle. They slaughtered livestock, detained families of Mafia members, including women and children, and used them as leverage. The town crier marched through the streets with a public ultimatum: surrender immediately or face the consequences. It was psychological warfare designed to break the Mafia's code of silence. The numbers were unprecedented. In one town alone, Mori captured 130 Mafia members and 300 associates. Across Sicily, over 11,000 individuals were arrested in his campaign. The result was the complete dismantling of the Sicilian Mafia's power structure. For the first time in centuries, the rule of law existed in Sicily. Farmers could work their land without paying protection money. Businesses could operate without fear. The Mafia would eventually return after World War II, but Mori's campaign proved something crucial. No criminal organization, no matter how deeply rooted or powerful, can withstand the full force of a determined government. So there you have it. 5 times cartels and criminal organizations thought they were untouchable, and 5 times they learned the hard way that governments have resources they can't even imagine. Whether it's the DEA's billion-dollar budgets, the Mexican military's advanced weaponry, or a small nation's determination to reclaim its streets, the pattern is always the same. Criminals think in terms of neighborhoods, cities, maybe regions. Governments think in terms of nations, international cooperation, and unlimited resources. The cartels operating today should take note. Every criminal empire in history has eventually fallen. The Guadalajara cartel, Los Zetas, the Sicilian Mafia. They all thought they were permanent fixtures. But here's what's different now. Government cooperation is stronger than ever. The DEA works with Mexican Marines. European agencies share intelligence with American task forces. Financial networks can be tracked across continents in real time. Satellite surveillance, encrypted communications, financial tracking, DNA analysis. The tools available to modern governments would seem like science fiction to the criminals of previous generations. Most importantly, these operations aren't just about law enforcement statistics. They're about the families destroyed by fentanyl, the communities terrorized by gang violence, the innocent people caught in the crossfire of criminal wars. When governments finally decide to act with full force, the results speak for themselves. Streets become safe again. Families can live without fear. Children can have futures that don't involve choosing between joining gangs or becoming victims. So, to any criminal organization watching this, study these cases carefully. Learn from the mistakes of those who came before you. Because history has shown us again and again that when you mess with the wrong government, you don't just lose, you get completely erased from existence. What do you think? Are these government responses justified, or do they go too far? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the rise and fall of criminal empires. In 2024, over 20,000 people were murdered by cartels in Mexico alone. But when these monsters made the mistake of targeting the wrong families, they discovered that some fathers will stop at nothing to get revenge. What you're about to see will make you question everything you thought you knew about justice. Because these aren't just stories of revenge. They're stories of fathers who became hunters and the cartel bosses who never saw them coming. Story 1. The lime farmer who became a cartel's worst nightmare. Jose Mora Chavez was just a simple lime farmer in Michoacan, Mexico. A gentle man with a friendly personality who loved his family and his community. But beneath that peaceful exterior was something the Knights Templar cartel would soon discover, a beast they should never have awakened. The Knights Templar cartel had turned Michoacan into their personal kingdom of terror. They extorted businesses, kidnapped for ransom, and brutally enforced their control over the region. The government. They were either bought off or too scared to act. But then they made a fatal mistake. During a shootout between the cartel and local self-defense groups in November 2014, they killed Jose's son. That was the moment a gentle lime farmer transformed into something the cartel had never faced before, a father with nothing left to lose. Jose didn't just grieve, he organized. He took charge of local vigilante groups and began a systematic campaign against the cartel. His courage was so legendary that even the Mexican government, who had tried to shut him down multiple times, eventually had no choice but to officially recognize his group. In 2014, these self-defense groups were legalized and integrated into the Rural Defense Corps. Jose and his men went from hunting rifles to M16. The cartel's worst nightmare had just become official. What followed was a systematic dismantling of cartel operations. Jose's groups drove out cartel members from several areas, engaging in fierce gun battles and reclaiming their towns. The man who had lost his son was making sure no other father would suffer the same fate. But the cartel wasn't going to let this slide. On June 29, 2023, as Jose traveled through his hometown, they finally got their revenge. In a coordinated ambush, gunmen riddled his vehicle with bullets before setting it on fire. Jose Mora Chavez died as he lived, fighting for his people, but his legacy lived on. The cartel members he had hunted were still behind bars, and his community was still free. Story 2. The consultant who outsmarted an entire criminal network. Eduardo Gallo thought he was taking his family on a peaceful weekend retreat to their home in Tepoztlan in July 2000. This successful consultant had worked hard to provide for his family, and this was supposed to be their sanctuary. But that sanctuary became a nightmare when armed men broke in, robbing the house and kidnapping his 25-year-old daughter, Paula. The kidnappers demanded $188,500 and valuable jewelry. Money Eduardo quickly gathered, desperate to save his daughter. Eduardo paid every penny. He gave them everything they asked for. But a week later, his worst fears were confirmed when Paula's lifeless body was discovered. She had been brutally shot in the back and neck. Here's what makes Eduardo's story incredible. In Mexico, over 90% of crimes are never even reported. Of those that are, only 1% are ever resolved. The system is so corrupt that most families just accept their loss and try to move on. But Eduardo Gallo wasn't most people. This successful consultant made a decision that would change everything. He shut down his firm and dedicated his entire life to hunting down his daughter's killers. What followed was a masterclass in detective work. Eduardo pored over phone records, followed leads, and navigated the dangerous terrain of Mexico's criminal networks. When police were unresponsive or dismissive, he kept pushing. When leads went cold, he found new ones. Months of relentless pursuit finally paid off. Eduardo tracked one of the kidnappers to a payphone he had used after the abduction. This crucial lead allowed police to set up a stakeout, resulting in the arrest of 28-year-old Francisco Zamora Arroyo. Under the weight of Eduardo's evidence and unwavering pursuit, Arroyo confessed to the crime. A father's love had accomplished what an entire justice system couldn't. He had brought his daughter's killer to justice. Eduardo's story became legendary in Mexico. Other families began reaching out to him for help. He had proven that even in a system riddled with corruption, a determined father could still find justice. Story 3. LM1, when they killed the wrong cartel boss's son. Manuel Torres Felix, known as LM1 or El Ondeado, the Crazy One, was already one of the most feared men in Mexico. As a high-ranking leader of the Sinaloa cartel, he had built an empire on violence and terror. But even the most ruthless cartel boss has a weakness. His weakness was his family. Despite being a heartless killer, LM1's love for his children was absolute. So when the Beltran Leyva cartel made the decision to murder his son, Atanasio Torres Acosta, they had no idea what they had just unleashed. April 2008. Atanasio was ambushed and killed in a violent attack that also injured his young daughter and sister-in-law. The news hit LM1 like a thunderbolt. The grief and rage transformed a man who was already a ruthless killer into something far worse. LM1's nickname, the Crazy One, took on a new meaning. His quest for revenge would be methodical, brutal, and absolute. Using his extensive network within the cartel, he began systematically tracking down everyone responsible for his son's death. The first target was a low-level member of the Beltran Leyva cartel involved in the ambush. LM1 captured him and brought him to his home in Culiacan, where he subjected the man to unimaginable torture, extracting every piece of information about the others involved. One by one, LM1 hunted down the perpetrators. He was merciless, often leaving bodies of his enemies in public places as a grim warning. Culiacan was covered in the blood of those who dared to harm his family. Musicians began singing about the legend of LM1, the father who avenged his son's death. His campaign of vengeance sent shockwaves through the criminal underworld, earning him a reputation as a man who would stop at nothing. The climax came when LM1 faced off against the high-ranking Beltran Leyva member who had orchestrated his son's murder. In the end, LM1 exacted his final revenge, bringing a brutal end to the man responsible. LM1's campaign left an indelible mark on both cartels. His actions proved the lengths a father would go to avenge his child, cementing his legacy as one of the most feared figures in cartel history. Story 4. The Lebaron Family, when Mormons became warriors. The Lebaron family were fundamentalist Mormons who had migrated to Mexico seeking peace. They established their community in the remote regions of Chihuahua, hoping to practice their faith away from persecution. They were pacifists by nature, but the cartels were about to learn that even the most peaceful people have a breaking point. November 4th, 2019. 3 women and 6 children from the Lebaron family were traveling in a convoy of SUVs to a wedding when their lives were cut short in the most brutal way imaginable. Attackers, suspected to be members of La Línea, a faction of the Juarez cartel, unleashed a hail of bullets on the vehicles. Ronita Miller and her 4 children were among the first to be attacked. The gunmen lit up their car with bullets before setting it ablaze, burning them alive. In another SUV, Donna Langford and her 2 sons, Trevor and Rogan, were also gunned down. 9 innocent lives were snuffed out in a matter of minutes. When Adrian Lebaron learned that his daughter and grandchildren were among the victims, something fundamental changed in this peaceful Mormon father. The grief transformed into something the cartels had never faced from this community before, a burning desire for justice. This wasn't the first time the Lebarons had clashed with cartels. In 2009, Benjamin Lebaron, an anti-crime activist, was brutally murdered along with his brother-in-law for speaking out against cartel violence. But this massacre was different. It crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Adrian's journey for justice began with a relentless pursuit of the truth. He collaborated with local and international authorities, pushing for a thorough investigation. His efforts drew international condemnation and put unprecedented pressure on the Mexican government. The relentless pressure worked. Years of legal battles and investigative journalism began chipping away at the cartel's impunity. The Mexican government, under increasing scrutiny, intensified efforts to dismantle the Juarez cartel. In a dramatic turn of events, the pursuit resulted in the arrest of Vicente Carrillo Fuentes and other high-ranking cartel members. El Chueco and his gang, the hitmen responsible for the massacre, were also captured. But the Lebarons realized they couldn't rely solely on the government for protection. The family that had once been pacifist Mormons began arming themselves, establishing roadblocks and checkpoints within their community. When the Mexican government denounced vigilante movements, the Lebarons found a clever workaround. They established shooting clubs, allowing them to legally own firearms without facing charges of illegal possession. "When it comes to protecting our family, we have to die doing it," Adrian declared. The peaceful Mormon community had become something the cartels never expected, an armed, determined force that would no longer be victims. Story 5. El Chapo's Revenge, when they killed the wrong son. Edgar Guzman Lopez was living the life of a cartel prince. As the eldest son of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, he had everything: money, power, and the protection of one of the world's most powerful drug lords. He owned the city and had nothing to fear. That confidence would be his downfall. Edgar and his bodyguards were driving through the city in a convoy of SUVs when they pulled into the parking lot of a shopping center in the Tres Rios neighborhood on May 8, 2008. It was supposed to be safe territory, a place where even someone of Edgar's stature could relax. But unknown to Edgar, a group of around 40 hitmen from the rival Beltran Leyva organization lay in wait. The ambush was meticulously planned. They knew exactly when and where to strike. When Edgar and his men stepped out of their vehicles, the sound of gunfire erupted. Edgar and his bodyguards were completely outgunned and outnumbered. Within minutes, Edgar was dead, hit by several bullets. The cartel prince had fallen. When El Chapo learned of his son's death, something inside him snapped. This wasn't just business anymore, this was personal. The man who had built an empire on violence was about to show the world what true brutality looked like. El Chapo called up his most trusted lieutenants, mobilizing the full might of the Sinaloa cartel. This wasn't just about revenge. He was going to send a message that no one messes with his family and lives to tell about it. El Chapo's intelligence team quickly identified the perpetrators. They were members of the Beltran Leyva organization, emboldened by the belief that they could strike at the heart of the Sinaloa cartel without repercussions. They were catastrophically wrong. El Chapo deployed his sicarios, elite assassins trained to kill without hesitation, to hunt down every last hitman involved in Edgar's murder. These weren't just killers. They were instruments of a father's wrath. 2008. The streets of Culiacan turned into a battlefield. El Chapo's men, armed with high-powered rifles and grenades, launched a series of coordinated attacks on rival strongholds. Buildings were reduced to rubble, the air thick with gunfire and explosions. The violence spread beyond Culiacan to Mexico City, where 2 police officers were killed. Nationwide, the country registered 493 drug-related deaths in the aftermath. Culiacan alone saw 16 murders, 24 of them police officers. The climax came when El Chapo himself led an assault on the rival leader's heavily fortified compound. In an intense firefight with bullets flying in every direction, El Chapo, driven by the memory of his son, personally executed the BLO leader who had orchestrated Edgar's murder. The message was clear: touch El Chapo's family, and he will burn your world to the ground. The father's revenge was complete, but the cost was measured in hundreds of lives and a city torn apart by violence. The psychology behind the revenge. But what drives a father to such extremes? Recent neuroscience research shows that when a parent loses a child, their brain undergoes dramatic changes. The grief activates the same neural pathways as physical pain, but amplified beyond normal human experience. Studies show that losing a child is considered the most traumatic experience a human can endure. It literally rewires the brain, often leading to what psychologists call complicated grief, a condition where normal mourning becomes an obsessive, all-consuming drive. What cartels fail to understand is that by targeting families, they're not just creating enemies, they're creating something far more dangerous: fathers with nothing left to lose and everything to avenge. The modern reality. As we speak in 2024, Mexico's cartel violence has reached unprecedented levels. The country recorded over 200,000 violent incidents this year alone, double the number from 2020. Fatality rates from cartel clashes increased by 18% in just 1 year, making Mexico the second most dangerous country for civilians globally. But the cycle continues. In regions where government protection fails, communities are still forming self-defense groups. Fathers are still taking justice into their own hands when the system fails their families. What's changed is the sophistication. Modern fathers hunting cartel members use social media intelligence, GPS tracking, and digital forensics. The tools have evolved, but the motivation remains the same. A father's love knows no bounds. The cost of vengeance. But every story of revenge comes with a cost. Jose Mora Chavez was eventually killed by the very cartels he fought. Miriam Rodriguez, who we didn't cover but who hunted down her daughter's killers, was shot 13 times outside her home. El Chapo is serving life in a U.S. Supermax prison. The question becomes, is revenge worth it? These fathers would say, yes. They chose to fight rather than accept injustice. They chose to honor their children's memory through action rather than silent grief. Their actions had real consequences. Cartel operations were disrupted, killers were brought to justice, and communities were freed from terror, at least temporarily. Lessons for the cartels. If there's one lesson cartels should learn from these stories, it's this. Targeting families isn't just morally wrong, it's strategically stupid. You're not just creating victims, you're creating lifelong enemies with nothing left to lose. The most successful criminal organizations understand this principle. They avoid civilian casualties, especially families, because they know it creates the kind of enemies that never give up, never forget, and never forgive. Every cartel leader who made the mistake of targeting families eventually paid the price. The Knights Templar cartel that killed Jose's son, dismantled. The Juarez cartel that massacred the Lebaron family, leadership arrested. The pattern is clear. The women warriors. While we focused on fathers, we can't ignore the mothers. Miriam Rodriguez, who hunted down her daughter's killers, represents thousands of Mexican mothers who've taken justice into their own hands when the system failed them. These mothers have formed collectives, sharing intelligence and resources. They've become some of the most effective investigators in Mexico, often outperforming official law enforcement. Their success rate is remarkable. While official police solve less than 1% of crimes, these mother investigators have solved dozens of cases, bringing killers to justice and finding missing loved ones. The price of love. These fathers paid the ultimate price for love. They sacrificed their safety, their peace, and often their lives to honor their children's memory and protect their communities. But their sacrifices weren't in vain. Cartel operations were disrupted, killers were brought to justice, and communities were freed from terror. Their love became a weapon more powerful than any cartel could imagine. Jose Mora Chavez is remembered as a hero who freed his community. Eduardo Gallo proved that determination can overcome corruption. The Lebaron family showed that even pacifists will fight when pushed too far. The battle continues. As long as cartels exist, as long as justice systems fail, there will be fathers and mothers willing to risk everything to protect their families and seek justice for their children. Because in the end, these stories teach us one fundamental truth. Never underestimate the power of a parent's love. It can move mountains, topple empires, and bring down the most powerful criminal organizations in the world. When cartels target families, they don't just create victims, they create hunters. And these hunters will never stop, never give up, and never forget until justice is served. The cartel boss was found zip-tied in women's lingerie, his face swollen beyond recognition, begging for mercy. Standing over him was a man they called El Marino Loco, the crazy Marine. But this wasn't just another arrest. This was psychological warfare at its finest, and it would change how America fights the drug war forever. October 18th, 2024. A quiet highway near Caborca, Sonora. 31-year-old Nicholas Douglas Quetz, a former U.S. Marine, is driving to the beach with friends when a dark SUV pulls alongside his truck. Cartel gunmen open fire. In seconds, Nicholas is dead, another American murdered by the very criminals the Marines have been hunting for decades. But here's what the cartels didn't know. They had just signed their own death warrant. Because when you kill a Marine, you don't just anger a family. You wake up the most lethal fighting force on the planet. Today, I'm going to show you the untold stories of how U.S. Marines have been systematically dismantling cartel empires, one brutal takedown at a time. These aren't just military operations. They're masterclasses in psychological warfare that have left cartel bosses sleeping with one eye open. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why the most feared criminals in the world now whisper one name in terror: El Marino Loco. Section 1. The ghost who started it all. The Marine who became a legend. February 7th, 1985, Guadalajara, Mexico. DEA agent Enrique "PEAKY" Camarena walks out of the U.S. consulate to meet his wife for lunch. He never makes it. Cartel gunmen, flashing fake police badges, throw him into a waiting car. What happened next would change everything. But here's what most people don't know about "PEAKY" Camarena. Before he became the symbol of America's drug war, he was a U.S. Marine. 4 years of service had sharpened his discipline, his instincts, and most importantly, his loyalty. And that Marine training would make him the most dangerous man the cartels had ever faced. The undercover ghost. For years, PEAKY worked undercover in Guadalajara. He didn't carry a weapon. His mind was his weapon. He moved through the city like a ghost, building a network of informants, memorizing conversations word for word. The cartels had no idea they were being hunted by a Marine. The $24 billion hit. Then came his masterpiece, Rancho Buffalo, a massive secret marijuana plantation worth billions. Thanks to PEAKY's intelligence, the Mexican military burned the entire operation to the ground. That single raid cost the Guadalajara cartel nearly $8 billion. In today's money, that's $24 billion. The cartel bosses were furious. They'd never suffered a financial hit that big. This wasn't just a raid, it was war, and they knew exactly who to blame. The ultimate sacrifice. February 7th, 1985. The cartel makes their move. They kidnap PEAKY in broad daylight, right outside the U.S. consulate. For the next 30 hours, this Marine endures unspeakable torture. His ribs are broken, his skull crushed, his jaw dislocated. They bring in a corrupt doctor to revive him, just so they can torture him again. But through it all, PEAKY refuses to break. When they find his body, wrapped in plastic and tossed in a shallow grave, something inside America snaps. Because the cartels didn't just kill a DEA agent, they murdered a U.S. Marine. And that meant war. Reagan's wrath. President Ronald Reagan promises PEAKY's wife that he'll get the justice a Marine deserves. Within hours, the U.S.-Mexico border is shut down completely. Cars back up for miles. Mexico's economy bleeds millions every hour. The message is clear: kill a Marine and face the wrath of the United States. Operation Leyenda becomes the biggest homicide investigation in DEA history. Within months, Guadalajara cartel bosses are falling like dominoes. Rafael Caro Quintero, arrested in Costa Rica. Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, captured in Puerto Vallarta. Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, the Godfather himself, thrown in a cell where he remains to this day. The game changes forever. But PEAKY's death did more than just bring down one cartel. It changed how America fights the drug war forever. For the first time, the military became part of the conversation, because cartels weren't just criminals anymore. They were insurgents, armed like militias, acting with impunity. What PEAKY revealed through his sacrifice was that this wasn't about crime, it was about control. And to fight for control, you need warriors who understand a different kind of war. You need Marines. Section 2. The Birth of a Monster. The Executioner falls. October 7th, 2012. Progreso, Coahuila. A Marine convoy rolls through the desert on what should be a routine patrol. Then, movement ahead. A white pickup speeding straight toward them. Suddenly, gunfire erupts. Grenades fly. Minutes later, 2 bodies lie in the dust. One of them shocks everyone. Distinctive tattoos, a gold-plated watch, and a face that had haunted Mexico for years. Heriberto Lascano, El Verdugo, the Executioner, the man who turned Los Zetas into Mexico's most feared cartel, was dead. From soldier to monster. But Lascano's story begins long before that dusty road in Coahuila. Born in Hidalgo in 1974, he enlisted in the Mexican Army at 17. Ambitious, loyal, lethal, he rose quickly through the ranks, making it to the GAFE, Mexico's elite special forces unit. The GAFE were trained by U.S. Marines and Green Berets. They learned urban warfare, psychological operations, and precision tactics. They were supposed to be Mexico's answer to the cartels. Instead, they became something much worse. The military defection. In 1998, Lascano vanishes from the barracks and reappears as something much more dangerous. He joins the Gulf Cartel, not as a drug dealer, but as a soldier. And then he helps create their armed wing, Los Zetas. Lascano brought military tactics to the drug world. Convoy ambushes, psychological ops, live executions broadcast online. This wasn't just crime, it was terrorism with a business model. The Terror Campaign. By the late 2000s, Los Zetas had evolved into something unprecedented. They didn't just kill their enemies, they made art out of it. Bodies left on highways, dismembered victims in oil drums, entire towns wiped off the map for refusing to submit. Lascano was rumored to film executions for his private collection. He made people kneel in public squares before blowing their heads off. To the world, he was the devil. To his men, he was untouchable. The fall of the untouchable. Until that Sunday afternoon in Coahuila. October 7th, 2012, a local baseball game is wrapping up in Progreso. Families head home, kids spill into taco stands. And then a white van, carrying 2 cartel sicarios, barrels down a nearby road, unaware they've crossed paths with a Marine patrol unit. A short, intense firefight breaks out. The sicarios fire first, using automatic weapons and a grenade launcher. The Marines respond with surgical precision. 2 bodies fall. One of them is wearing a gold-plated watch with distinctive tattoos. The Marines recognize him almost immediately. Heriberto Lascano, El Verdugo himself. He had no entourage, no bodyguards, no escape tunnel, just a weapon and a van. And in seconds, the man who once ruled half of Mexico was face down in the dirt. The mystery deepens. But the story doesn't end there. That night, a convoy of armed men storms the funeral home. They overpower the guards, break into the refrigeration unit, and steal Lascano's body. No photos are released to the public. No press conference with the body on display. For years, rumors swirl. Was it really him? Was it a double? Did he fake his death? No one can say for sure. But what can't be denied is what came next. The beast evolves. Lascano's death shattered the myth of invincibility, but it didn't kill the beast. Because the man who replaced him was even worse, more brutal, more reckless. Under his command, Los Zetas would become the most feared cartel in Mexico. They called their torture chambers kitchens, not for food, but for people. These sick bastards boiled their victims alive, sometimes in front of their families. And this wasn't just isolated horror, it was their signature. But in 2008, they crossed a line even they couldn't walk back from. They kidnapped American citizens, and that's when the Marines got personally involved. Section 3. The Kitchen of Hell. The House of Horrors. A basement in Nuevo Laredo, northern Mexico. Blood smeared on the walls, a steel barrel still smoking, the floor covered in cable ties, decomposing clothes and shards of bone. Inside, investigators find what Los Zetas called a kitchen. Not for food, for people. These monsters boiled their victims alive, sometimes in front of their families. And this wasn't just isolated horror, it was their calling card, their signature of terror. Z40. The sadist takes control. After Lascano's death, the man who took over wasn't a soldier like his predecessor. He wasn't methodical or coldly strategic. Miguel Trevino Morales, known as Z40, was chaotic, sadistic, and completely unhinged. Z40's specialty was a method called El Guiso, the stew. They would take a family member, put them in a pig boiler, pour gasoline on them, and set them on fire. Sometimes Z40 would boil his enemies' families first, right in front of them, before ending their misery. The fatal mistake. By 2008, Los Zetas controlled Nuevo Laredo, the most lucrative drug corridor into Texas, and that's where they made their fatal mistake. Because one night, they kidnapped American hostages. And that's when the U.S. Marines were called in, not just to help, but to end it. Operation Rescue. 2008, Nuevo Laredo. A Zeta compound had been identified deep in cartel-controlled territory, surrounded by lookout towers, armed guards, and escape tunnels. Inside, American hostages, cartel leadership, and an armory of military-grade weapons. The Mexican government couldn't go in alone. Too risky, too compromised. So the U.S. Marine Corps stepped in to train an elite task force, Mexico's Marina, one of the few branches not infiltrated by cartel money. Marine Training Intensive. For weeks, Marines ran drills with their Mexican counterparts. Urban warfare, hostage recovery, tunnel clearance. They studied satellite imagery, listened to intercepted radio chatter, and learned about every crack in every wall. The night raid. Then came the night. 2:41 a.m., Nuevo Laredo. Marine snipers positioned on rooftops, covering every exit. A guard on the perimeter spots movement and opens fire. Big mistake. Within seconds, Marine-trained units breach the compound from 3 directions. Suppressors hiss. Flashbangs shatter windows. Los Zetas fight like animals, wild, desperate, disorganized. But the Marines fight like machines. Precise, silent, relentless. Perfect execution. Room by room, they clear the complex. Sicarios found hiding in closets, under beds, behind fake walls. They have nowhere to run. In a locked basement room, they discover 10 hostages, 4 Americans, 6 Mexicans, chained, beaten, left to rot, but against all odds, still alive. 48 cartel members dead. 0 Marines lost. This mission wasn't just a rescue, it was a message. The king falls. And in 2013, they got their biggest prize. Miguel Trevino Morales, Z40 himself, riding in an armored vehicle down a dirt road in Tamaulipas. 8 bodyguards, $2 million in cash, and an arsenal in the trunk. What he didn't have was a clue that his location had been compromised. A convoy of Mexican Marines, trained in U.S. interdiction tactics, blocked the road. They surrounded his vehicle. No shots fired, no casualties. Z40 was dragged out of his truck and cuffed like a petty criminal. The takedown of Z40 and the destruction of the Nuevo Laredo compound marked the beginning of the end for Los Zetas as a unified force. But the story doesn't end with their collapse, because while Marines helped bring down one of Mexico's most terrifying cartels, there was one man, just one, who didn't wait for orders. He didn't just fight the cartels, he humiliated them. Section 4. El Marino Loco, the legend. The man in the corner. Tampico, Tamaulipas. A cartel commander sits dressed in women's lingerie, his nose broken, eyes swollen shut. In the corner of the room stands a man, 5 feet 7 inches, stocky, calm. He's holding a meat tenderizer. He doesn't shout or gloat. He just asks, "Are you ready to be famous?" They called him El Marino Loco, the crazy Marine, but the cartels called him the man you don't want knocking at your door. The making of a legend. His real name was Eric Morales Guevara, a former member of the Mexican Navy's elite Marine unit. Born and raised in a small town in northern Mexico, Eric didn't join the military for glory or a paycheck. He joined because his home had become a graveyard. His town was swallowed by the Gulf Cartel. His friends either disappeared or were recruited. What was once a quiet rural village became a no-go zone where cartel men trained openly in stolen military gear and held block parties with machine guns. Where others ran or gave in, Eric enlisted. He didn't just want to fight the cartels, he wanted to ruin them. Mr. Thor, the weapon of choice. By the mid-2000s, whispers about a Marine with strange tactics began to circulate. He carried a meat tenderizer, a steel one, custom-made. He called it Mr. Thor. To him, it wasn't a weapon, it was a reminder. This is what you did to people. Now it's your turn. And it worked. Word spread fast. Traffickers would surrender on sight if they heard he was nearby. Some even pretended to be civilians just to avoid crossing paths with him. The art of humiliation. But the real fear came from what he did after the arrest. Eric didn't just arrest cartel leaders, he humiliated them in ways that would hurt kingpins the most. When he captured El Mudo, a Gulf cartel commander, he stripped him of more than just weapons. He forced them into women's lingerie, paraded them in front of their sicarios, and filmed every second. Those photos went viral across Mexico. Then he made them kiss each other on camera. Psychological warfare mastery. When Eric arrested Silvestre Haro Rodriguez, aka El Cheve, he didn't just seize his weapons. He took his father's ashes, left taunting notes on family photos, and scattered the urn's remains across the compound. That day, El Cheve placed a 3 million peso bounty on Eric's head. Another cartel boss went even further, 2 million pesos, dead or alive. These weren't rumors. These were documented threats. But Eric never stopped. In fact, he escalated. The hunt for Comandante Toro. His most infamous target was Julian Loisa Salinas, better known as Comandante Toro, a top Gulf cartel enforcer responsible for massacres across northern Mexico. Every time Eric's unit closed in, Toro slipped away, warned by someone on the inside. There were rumors of deep cartel infiltration in government ranks, but Eric didn't care. He launched his own campaign. He blocked Toro's routes, hijacked his drugs, made his people defect. The final hunt. Toro got sloppy, desperate to reclaim his turf. April 22, 2017, a military shootout erupts in Reynosa. When the dust settled, Comandante Toro was dead. Eric wasn't at the scene, but everyone knew who set those dominoes in motion. Section 5. The Prince Falls. The son of El Chapo. January 5, 2023, 6 a.m., Jesus Maria, a quiet town nestled in the hills outside Culiacan, erupts into war. Helicopters thunder overhead. Special forces surround a large villa. And inside that house, surrounded by 30 armed guards and a family still in pajamas, is Ovidio Guzman Lopez, El Raton, son of El Chapo. Ovidio Guzman wasn't just another cartel prince. He was born into narco royalty, the son of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, maybe the most notorious drug trafficker in modern history. While his father built Sinaloa with cocaine and tunnels, Ovidio and his brothers, known as Los Chapitos, carved their legacy in fentanyl and digital surveillance. The failed capture of 2019. But this wasn't the first time they had him. October 17, 2019, Mexican forces capture Ovidio during a botched raid. But within hours, the Sinaloa cartel launches a siege on the city, burning houses, shooting civilians, surrounding military bases, even threatening to massacre soldiers' families. The government folded. Ovidio was released. That moment, the Culiacanazo, was a national humiliation. It told the world that the Mexican government wasn't in control. The perfect storm. January 5, 2023. The town of Jesus Maria wakes up to gunfire. Mexican special forces, trained by U.S. Marines, descend from choppers straight into Ovidio's backyard. His sicarios, still dazed from a massive party the night before, are caught off guard. Drunk, high, and asleep. They scramble for rifles, but it's too late. Within minutes, the house is surrounded. Armed forces breach the compound and find Ovidio in bed. His daughters are rushed out the back door by terrified family members. The cartel strikes back. Within 15 minutes, Los Ninis, Ovidio's elite guard, block every road into Jesus Maria with burning trucks and machine gun nests. Gunmen shoot at civilian airliners, storm the Culiacan airport, execute ambushes on convoys. For hours, Sinaloa was a war zone. 29 people killed, 10 military, 19 cartel soldiers, 35 sicarios wounded, multiple civilians injured, an entire town cut off from electricity and internet. This time, they don't fold. The scale of retaliation was bigger than anything seen in years. But this time, the government didn't fold. The Marines weren't just watching, they were guiding. While no American troops officially crossed into Mexican soil, make no mistake, this was a joint operation. U.S. Marine Corps intelligence played a crucial role in planning the mission. From drone surveillance to ground infiltration strategy, Marine-trained special forces executed the breach. The technology behind the win. U.S. radio intercepts pinpointed Ovidio's exact location. A MOS, a surveillance tool developed by U.S. Homeland Security, provided real-time data during the operation. This wasn't just a Mexican military win, it was a Marine playbook executed by both nations. Justice in Chicago. By September 2023, Ovidio was on U.S. soil, inside a Chicago prison, awaiting trial. Alone, far from his fortress, far from the empire he inherited. And his house? Burnt to the ground. The same way Marines plan to leave every cartel stronghold they touch. Operation Mongoose Aztec wasn't just the takedown of a cartel heir. It was a statement that even the most protected narco princes can be touched. But even as one kingpin was being dragged from his stronghold, another message was being written, this time in blood. Because just months later, the cartels struck back. Not at a drug agent or a rival, but at a U.S. Marine. And what followed would change everything. Section 6. The Catalyst. The murder that changed everything. October 18, 2024. A quiet highway near Caborca, Sonora. 31-year-old Nicholas Douglas Quetz, a former U.S. Marine, is behind the wheel of his truck, laughing with friends on their way to the beach. But just past a desolate gas station, a dark SUV pulls up beside him. Cartel gunmen open fire. In seconds, Nicholas is riddled with bullets. His friends survive, but the Marine doesn't make it out. And that single act would trigger a storm of vengeance that's still unfolding today. A legacy of service. Nicholas Quetz was born into a family with a sixth-generation legacy of military service. Raised in Arizona, loyalty, discipline, and service were in his blood. He joined the U.S. Marine Corps as soon as he could, serving in the Pacific, trained in jungle warfare, deployed to Southeast Asia. After years of service, he finally came home, ready to build a future and live a quiet life. Until the cartels took it all away. Not a random act. The shooting wasn't a robbery. Nothing was stolen. His wallet, phone, and cash were all untouched. This wasn't random violence either. It was a targeted execution, a message sent by the Caborca cartel, the ones controlling that highway like a private kingdom. A father's vow. The news hit like a bomb. Within days, Nicholas's father, Warren Quetz, a retired U.S. Army lieutenant, stepped in front of cameras and said, "I'll process my son's death after I bring justice." not before. Trump's promise. Then came the real headline. October 31st, 2024, a rally in Nevada. Trump brings Nicholas's family on stage. His father speaks. "My son was murdered by cowards, shot in the back on the way to the beach in Mexico." Then Trump makes a vow that sends chills throughout the cartel world. "We're going to get that guy. Mexico will give him to us. They have to." The military response begins. Within weeks, Reaper drones are circling cartel strongholds in Sonora. A specialized task force of 150 intelligence analysts begins reviewing every movement, every phone call, every shadow. The CIA joins in. Surveillance expands. First blood. February 13th, 2025, a joint strike takes down 7 cartel members tied to Nicholas's murder. Arrested among them, Jonathan Antonio, also known as El Gaya, a mid-level enforcer who confessed to planning the ambush. But for the Marines, this wasn't justice. It was the beginning. The game changes forever. In early 2025, Trump formally returns to power and designates the top cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. That single move changes everything. The U.S. military is now authorized to use counterterrorism tactics against cartels. That means covert drone operations, Delta Force deployments, and cross-border joint task forces. They're now officially in the same category as ISIS. The current war. As we speak, over 4,000 U.S. naval personnel, including Marines, have been deployed to waters around Latin America and the Caribbean. The 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit and the Iwo Jima Amphibious Ready Group are staging in the U.S. Southern Command region. Thousands of Marines and National Guard members are flooding the borderlands. Reaper drones flying over smuggling routes, feeding real-time intelligence to command centers in California and Texas. Marine Raiders, the elite Special Ops Unit, staging night raids on stash houses and safe zones. Nicholas's legacy. Nicholas Quetz's death became the catalyst for something cartels had long believed was impossible: full-scale U.S. military engagement. Maybe, just maybe, the days of cartel terror are almost over, and it's all thanks to the U.S. Marine Corps. Semper Fi. Conclusion. The legend lives on. The unbroken chain. From Kiki Camarena's sacrifice in 1985 to Nicholas Quetz's murder in 2024, one thing has remained constant. When you target a Marine, you don't just anger a family, you wake up the most lethal fighting force on the planet. El Marino Loco's shadow. Somewhere out there, El Marino Loco might still be operating in the shadows, Mr. Thor in hand, making cartel bosses fear their own reflections. The legend lives on because the mission never ends. The Marine Creed. The Marines have a saying, "No better friend, no worse enemy." The cartels are about to learn what that really means. What do you think about the Marines taking on the cartels? Should they be designated as terrorist organizations? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to see more stories about the warriors who keep us safe, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. The war isn't over. It's just getting started.